Deep Space Assassin by P.E. Rowe. The assassin had no business at Asphodel the day he first set eyes on the girl captain. It was just a stop on his way through the Alphas to his next target in the Indies. A meal, a few drinks, and a good night's sleep in gravity. As hard as it was for a man like him to be low profile, that was what he'd intended the stop to be. But that wasn't always the way, especially on Alpha Origi. Of course he had people on such a major outpost. He did work quite often for the Rexes, so he had business associates, never to be trusted, but always respected, just as he expected them to respect him. That meant allowing him to move about unbothered unless they had something urgent for him. It wasn't the Rexes who pinged him on his way down, though. "Boss, I have something for you from Aranu. It's quick and lucrative." "You know I don't like quick, Ditra," the assassin told his contact. "When I said lucrative, I was underselling the payout a little." "Send it to me. I'll probably say no." The file came across. "A little light on the details," the assassin stated. "Aranu said the info will be enough to pick her out. Target's name is an alias, he reckoned. That's why the specifics are light." "Lucrative, though." The killer looked at the details. 100,000 LCR, and an assumed name concealing a true identity. The ship's tag number and a bay, a description of her crew, and a light description of a blonde woman in her early 20s. Trim. Pretty. "There's nothing here, Ditra. Vela Trieri, what do you have on her?" "The info in the file checks out. They've been on the deck now for half a day. I haven't set eyes on her myself, just on the vessel. Info is solid. An old letters transport. Story I've gotten on the ground is that she ran afoul of trading partners outside of the Rex's scope. Apparently she has friends in the Rex's circle and was taking advantage. Burned one too many partners who didn't have such blessings. Aranu doesn't even have a picture of her. Word is she rarely leaves the ship. I saw the others, though. A pair of mercenaries and a medic. A herald, too." "These mercenaries, are they clowns? One would think they'd have to be, running with a girl like that." "No, they're serious fighters. One's a former rockhopper, letters man, half blown to hell and only half repaired. The other's a Terran, I think. A killer." "Aranu sent this through." "Yes, boss." The assassin was giant. As his ship descended, his bulk was beginning to stress the restraints in his oversized jump seat. He crossed his long arms over his massive torso, thumb and forefinger stroking 5 days' stubble from his trip across the inner lettered systems. "All right," he relayed to his contact. "ID the girl, and if I pick it up I'll cut you in at 10% if the ID's good. If I get her before I know her name, you get nothing, Ditra." "Fair's fair, boss. I'll get it. I don't want to hear from you for any other reason." "Understood," Ditra replied. "Just one added thought. I know you don't like me thinking, boss, but Aranu didn't say this was exclusive, so it's possible he's got other people on this. Only pays to be first in our business." "Does it? Is that what you think?" the assassin replied. "See, Ditra, that's why I don't like you thinking. Go get me an ID." "Yes, boss. You'll have it the second I do." He'd hardly settled into his suite before Ditra pinged back. It hadn't even been 3 hours. He'd barely had a chance to soak and shower. He was expecting an ID and was growing perturbed each word that came out of his contact's mouth that wasn't Captain Vela Trieri's actual identity. "They're out to dinner on the ground floor of the merchant outlets near the southwest docking bay. I have a source on their location. You can catch the whole crew if you hurry." "No ID?" "Unfortunately not. Best picture my source could catch without alerting that a Terran was this." The assassin laughed when the image came through. "Nice shot." Ditra continued. "I've never seen those 2 boys of hers before. None of the Rex's guys know them either. They didn't seem to know who the girl was. My contact in the market said she's pretty and awful young to be the captain of a vessel and a crew like that. I know it's not an ID, so call it a tip and a courtesy. The sign of respect, Merkist. I don't like to talk to anyone I don't know, Ditra. I damn sure don't like killing someone who's a complete mystery to me." "I know. 100 grand is 100 grand, though. I'd rather you had the opportunity to turn it down than not know about it." "That's fair. the assassin said. "If you find out who she is, let me know. I'll likely let it slide. I have work elsewhere anyway." The assassin fully intended to forget about the job. He was hungry, though, and there were plenty of dinner options near that docking bay. If he happened to put eyes on them while he was getting a meal, all the better. There was something about it beyond the mystery that kept him turning the prospect over in his mind. The Ateran and the Rockhopper. People like that didn't usually run with unknowns, especially ones barely old enough to be traveling without her parents. Or so this girl captain looked to be from that low-quality image Ditra's contact sent through. 100 grand. The whole thing became almost as big a curiosity as a business opportunity. So the Merkist got dressed for dinner. "Well, friend, you may be tough, but you are not subtle," the assassin muttered to himself, observing the half-metal Rockhopper from a distance. Not only could the Merkist pick his metal face out of a crowd at 100 meters, he could hear his leg clunking from nearly as far. Likely why they unlisted him. A son of a bitch that tough was bound to be useful once the fighting started, though. The Merkist made a point to observe from a distance, from the metal man's living side, who knew what kind of surveillance tech he had embedded in that metal half. The Ateran was bolts. The Merkist could tell from his walk and his eyes. He was as formidable as military men came. The medic wasn't a medic at all. She was a doctor, and not a doctor who'd been pushed up the chain out of necessity or short-handedness in the military hospital ships near the front. She came from the top down, a top surgeon or researcher by the look of her. She looked sad, but content enough in present company. The girl, Velatrieri, the captain, he couldn't get a good look at her face because the Ateran kept such a good line of sight. But just from the way the Ateran was watching her, the Merkist could tell she was important, not some legacy in a family of freight runners. Important. That crew was odd. The whole thing didn't fit. A mark that big on a kid with a fake name and no picture. Then he saw movement on the upper causeways when the letters man stood to take a survey of their exit. 3 of them, the Merkist observed, on the second and third decks. Yahoos dumb enough to hit this mark for 100 grand. And as the ship's crew got up from the table, the assassin caught a quick glimpse of the girl, walking out of the plaza. She looked over her shoulder, and from that distance it looked like it could be. The Ateran hadn't seen the Yahoos yet, and the metal man was too clunky to be observant enough. The women those 2 mercenaries were guarding, the doctor and the girl captain, were oblivious to any danger. The Merkist knew where their ship was parked. He had to see the girl's face before they walked into something regrettable. Somewhere between, where things got quiet, that's where those Yahoos were going to do it. He could see 6 of them now. With that Ateran and the Rockhopper, the Merkist shook his head. They'd need all of them, those Yahoos. But they were just dumb enough to not know it. Before the crew got hit, the Merkist was able to get ahead of them. And difficult as it was for a man of his size to be inconspicuous, he learned enough tricks in his line of work. He got his line of sight on the girl. Confirmation. It was her, 100% with his naked eye, and the FR comparison in his eyewear. Whatever the hell she was doing out here, it was rubbing somebody the wrong way. But it also couldn't happen. Not here in Ashvidal. It would turn the letters upside down. Athos coming out here. All those entitled people and bottomless wealth, bloodthirsty with vengeance. Athosians already had a penchant for taking over everything. This would give them the reason they hardly needed anyway. Merkist was on the second tier, 100 meters from the girl captain and her crew, watching as they approached. Then he saw the pinch point, the Yahoos closing from above. There in the long quiet stretch between the marketplace and the docking bay. That crew was exposed as hell down there. He was searching about for some way to warn them without being too obvious. The Ateran, though, he'd seen something or heard something. He was watching, looking up. Then he vanished. The half-metal Rockhopper ushered the captain and the doctor to cover. They were there, hidden as best they could be in the center of a first-level concourse, tucked behind a tree and its planter. The entire wing went eerily silent for nearly a minute. Then the shooting started. Second and third level ahead of him. The Mercist moved to eliminate the 2 shooters on his level. The first didn't see him coming. Some men get blinders in a gunfight. Can't even see a threat as large as him. He'd grabbed the shooter and popped his neck before the guy even knew he'd been grabbed. From that position, the Mercist could see 2 of the others. One on the same tier, one on the upper level across the way. They didn't even see him take out their partner. Blinders. Boom and boom. Then, he saw the Ateran on the far side of the second level. He'd seen. He'd worked a quiet blade into 2 more of them and was eyeing their fleeing partner. Mercist looked over and saw the Ateran calculating what to make of him. Eyes to him, and then back to the girl. He was smart. He didn't stick around to ask questions, just made for the girl. That was enough of a window to get her out of there. That left 1 Yahoo and a whole lot of questions. The Mercist couldn't remember hearing of a livelier night in Ashvidal in ages. Mearsong Rex would not be happy. The last survivor of a gunfight tends to blend poorly into a crowd. This one kept looking over the wrong shoulder. By the time he finally looked over the right one, the Mercist already had him by the neck. There were people around the concourse, so he pulled the man back into a shop entrance. It was shuttered at that hour. The assassin knew how to make an encounter like this look like something different. "I told you not to go near her again, you creep! She's a child!" All the prying eyes immediately abandoned the man to his fate. I don't know," the man began. "Yeah, you don't," the Mercist said as he squeezed his throat quiet. "I'm going to kill you, but it can be long and painful or quick and painful. Your choice. Don't bullshit me. That girl you were shooting at, you and your friends, do you know who she is?" "Some starship captain," the man said, his eyes shifting about, looking for an escape. "Look at me," the Mercist said, tilting the man's neck up from the chin. "Her name. Vela something," he coughed. "Her real name." "That is her name. That's all I know." "Who put out the hit?" "I don't know." "You don't know who hired you?" "Some local contact." "Ranu?" "That sounds right." "Where are you from?" "Montauk." "Never heard of it." "It's a cylinder group, mostly abandoned since the start of the war. In the Indies." "You and your boys were mercenaries? Bounty hunters? Hired muscle?" "Just did jobs, man." "Idiots. Just like you looked." "Look, my friend." "I'm sorry, but you are all out of friends, fool. But I'm feeling charitable, because that shit show back there went down about as well as it could have. You get a choice. Long and painful, or quick and painful." The Mercist squeezed his trachea shut, pinning the man against the store's metal shutter. Most men didn't like to answer that question, and wouldn't answer until he let them know it was already over. After about 30 seconds of breathlessness, when he knew the man understood fully, he let up his grip just enough so that one remaining amateur assassin understood the purpose of his final breath. "Quick!" The Mercist lifted the man by the neck with both hands, took several steps to the 3rd-story railing, and tossed the man toward a wide break in the pedestrian traffic on the causeway, 25 meters below. He didn't linger. The Mercist walked quickly but casually down a side corridor. This was the Rex's city. Not many people in the letters could get away with something like that in their marketplace, but he could. He needed a word with the old man anyway. It didn't take Ditra long to ping him on his eyewear. He was still walking back to the suite. "Tell me you didn't know," the assassin said. "Know what?" Ditra asked. "Fine. I take it you didn't get the girl because I just got done talking to the Rexes. Their chief of security in the market said you tossed some guy from the Indies off a 3rd-floor causeway." "Where's Oranu?" "I don't think he's going to want to see you if you let that girl get away." "He's definitely not going to want to see me. No. That girl, the one playing starship captain with those fighters, I got her ID, Ditra, with my own eyes. Her name is Carolina Dreesen. You heard me correctly. Dreesen, as in the same name as the star system. Somebody sent me and a bunch of idiots after Carolina Dreesen. thinking that somebody would be ignorant enough to kill her. And you're in that chain of communication. I'm going after somebody. So you either get me a location on Uranu and fast, or I'm coming after you. I didn't know, Merkist, I swear. I figured as much, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'll have his location for you in an hour. Less even. Just give me a chance. That's what this is, Ditra. Your chance. Thank you, boss. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. One of the Dreesens? Ditra asked. Who in the letters would... That's what I'm going to find out. And set me a meeting with Mearsong Rex. He's going to want to know what almost happened in his South Causeway. Consider it done, boss. Ditra came through. Uranu had a friend running a bar as a front in Ashvadal. That friend gave Ditra a location on the far side of Origi before the Merkist's man crushed the bar owner's head under an industrial refrigerator. That, the Merkist thought, was a nice piece of creative flair, the kind of thing that got people talking in the right way. No one who liked his head intact would be tipping off Uranu before the Merkist could get there. The location was a small, self-contained trading post called Den. It was a glorified airstrip for a mining outpost that Uranu had taken over after bullying the miners into allowing him to stay. Merkist thought it might be tough, an outpost that small. Uranu would see him coming. He'd have people, maybe even bots. Under ordinary circumstances, he'd have had Ditra send some people to do reconnaissance. But if he waited, he knew word would get back to Uranu about what had happened at Ashvadal, the firefight, the Dreesen girl getting away. Word did get to Den. It either came from Uranu's bar owner's friends or from Ditra himself. But the word was that he, the Merkist, was coming to Den for Uranu. And apparently, Uranu's people wanted no part of the trouble their boss had gotten them into. We have a package for you. A ping came from the tiny comm station at the outpost. Hardly even a control tower. He hadn't even called them to ask for permission to land. He didn't usually ask for permission. Certainly not from peasant miners on the ass side of Origi. And definitely not from Uranu's people. I'll pick it up when I come in. He pinged them back. No need to come in, sir, came the return. We think you'll be satisfied, and hope that you'll consider that we saved you time and aggravation. We'll bring the package to you with our compliments. They didn't have a bay like at Ashvadal, so it was a pain in the ass to belt up and walk all the way into the airlock, an exposed position he didn't care much for. That sounds exactly like something I'd consider, he told them. We'll be right out, sir. The Merkist hadn't been on the surface again for a minute before 4 men were at his back airlock, carrying a 5th man inside a body bag, wrapped up tight in vent tape. Good to have a reputation, the assassin muttered to himself, grinning. They didn't even step inside, just tossed the package into the airlock and headed back to Den, the hindmost of the 4 men pausing only long enough to turn and give the camera's eye a mock salute before departing. They'd zipped up the body bag with enough air around the head that Uranu didn't completely suffocate in transit. His torso was wrapped, mummy-like, so tight the guy could barely breathe. Uranu, I presume, the Merkist stated, after pulling the man's head out of the bag once he'd gotten him inside the ship. His mouth was taped shut as well, so all he could do was nod nervously. You made a bad decision, Mr. Uranu. We're going to have a talk with the Rexes. You're going to want to talk with them. He'd hardly strapped the package into the jump seat beside him before Ditra pinged. My contact over there said you were happy with the package? Happy's a strong word to use today, Ditra, but you haven't disappointed. I have a landing assignment for you at Ashvadal. The Rexes are awaiting your arrival. They'll take care of everything. And even concierge service, Ditra. Amazing how efficient you can be when properly motivated. Yes, sir. I can be. The Rexes got the old man out of storage. Mearsong wasn't happy about being disturbed at home, and his son Kai was even angrier, having his authority undermined by getting the old man called down. The Merkist had met them both, a relationship of mutual respect and openness. They gave him leeway to operate on their grounds, and he gave them options in delicate situations, the ability to keep their hands clean, plausible deniability, efficiency, confidence. And they knew that whenever one of the Mercus people called and said there was a situation, there was a situation. This situation was belted to a chair in Mirsong Rex's office, still taped inside that body bag up to his neck, vent tape over his mouth. Oranu looking about as miserable as he probably felt. The Mercist was reasonably sure from watching his body language that he still didn't know what he'd done. There were 2 Trasp strike bots at either side of Mirsong's table. Kai was by the old man's side, as well as a younger brother the Mercist didn't know. There were also 2 fixers. One was an attorney of questionable adherence to the law, but unquestioned power. The other was a manager of Mirsong Rex's considerable army of people. "This is the problem you brought me down here for, Mercist? This little man? Doesn't look like much of a problem now, does he?" Mirsong Rex grimaced, looking down at Oranu. "At worst, until now, this man has been a minor nuisance to you and your operations. Otherwise, no doubt you'd have taken care of the problem already. I could just as easily have disposed of him without bothering you, but out of respect, I thought you should know what he probably doesn't know." "And what is this?" Rex asked the Mercist. "I'd like to hold off on that for a moment, if you will allow me." The Mercist gestured toward Oranu. Mirsong Rex nodded. His fixer ripped the vent tape off Oranu's mouth. He grimaced and grunted, moving his lips up and down and taking a deep breath. Even he knew better than to speak before he was spoken to. "The girl captain," the Mercist began. "I want a list of every person associated with that job. Who fronted the money, who your contact was, who you first heard about it from, everyone up the chain from you and below you. Everyone." "That's what this is about?" "Who put the hit on Velatrieri?" The Mercist could see his eyes surveying the room, calculating. "I assure you, whoever you're afraid of pissing off by betraying their confidence, they're never getting a crack at you. There are 2 questions left for you now, Oranu. How bad is my death going to be, and how long is the process going to last?" "Why should I talk to you then?" "This is not a game we're playing, son," Mirsong Rex's attorney stated. "Mercist's man was very thorough relaying your background to us when we talked. You have a girlfriend with 2 daughters on Alpha Richard, and a sister on Megara who has 2 boys of her own." "We haven't even begun to dig deep," Mirsong Rex said. "I do not like it when people I allow to operate in my territory do so disrespectfully right in my face." The old man had worked himself into a fury. "Maziri," Oranu stated. "He was my contact. The price for me to facilitate was $500,000, no questions asked." "Maziri? That weasel?" the Mercist said, looking over at Mirsong Rex. "Isn't he an Eastern asset?" "Iophos, yes," Oranu stated. "He works directly for their intelligence service, mostly moving weapons and information." "You ever take a bid on a hit from him before?" the Mercist asked. "Not him personally, never." "You didn't think it was odd getting a call for a sum that large on a nobody ship captain?" "No disrespect. Your reputation precedes you, obviously, or I wouldn't have called your guy. But most of the contacts people in your line of work take don't come from sources like Missouri. Comes from ordinary channels. I'm one of those channels because I know people, including intel operatives. $500,000 isn't a rare sum for a government to pay a guy like me to make a problem disappear quietly. I've done business with Eastern intelligence contacts before. A handful of times. The Iophans always paid when I came through." "Iophos?" "On the girl. Yes, Iophos was the source." "Did you know who this girl is?" Mirsong Rex asked. "I don't know myself, but I'm guessing that her name isn't Velatrieri, or whatever you said it was." "As I said, sir, $500,000. No questions asked. So I didn't ask." "He knows, though, I'll bet," Oranu said, gesturing toward the Mercist with his head. You sent me to kill Carolina Dreesen, you dead idiot, the Merkist stated. Mearsong Rex looked over at the Merkist wide-eyed. The attorney and the fixer looked at each other in shock. Oranu began to laugh. What's so funny, Mr. Oranu? Not so funny for long. I assure you of that. Hell, he said. If you're going to go down, might as well be in a flaming wreck, right? Is there anything else we should know? Mearsong Rex asked. Bear in mind that we can revisit this matter of your relatives at any time in the future, should we find a reason. Oranu sighed and looked up at the Merkist. I have a ledger on my cruiser out at Den. It has all my contacts, how to get in touch with them. It's all in there. I'll give my guys the encryption sets and have them send you the whole thing. That's got all the details. The big picture is this. Missouri is a hard guy to track down. From what I understand, he likes to pop in and out between the Kappas and the Alphas. He keeps a suite on Annuncium, the mobile fleet, Fleet City, whatever you want to call it. I have the details in my files. You could probably track him down there, but most of the time he's traveling. I never call him. He calls me. Called you, Mr. Oranu, the Merkist said. Yeah, called me, Oranu replied, shaking his head. Carolina Dreesen. Unbelievable. What the hell would the Iophans want to murder her for? And what the hell is Barnard Dreesen's daughter doing all the way out here for anyway? Those are very good questions for someone to answer, Mearsong Rex said. But since you tried to pay someone to kill this Dreesen girl in my house, which is my responsibility, those are questions somebody else is going to answer, Mr. Oranu. Unfortunately for you, this transgression is so very large. The punishment must be widely known and biblical in proportion. You understand. But since you have been forthcoming, and if your information on your ledger proves useful, as long as you continue to operate in good faith till the end, then I will honor the line be kept between our business lives and our personal lives. You understand me, Mr. Oranu? Yes, sir. I understand. Do not embarrass me or yourself any further. Do I make myself clear? I won't. The elder Rex looked over at the Merkist. Government actors. This situation with Missouri may be delicate. Not that delicate, the Merkist replied. I will get you your answers, and then I will kill him. Quietly, Rex said, shaking his head. None of this tossing people off balconies in front of civilians. You're better than that nonsense. We all are. Present company excluded. Mearsong Rex looked down at Oranu with disgust. As you say, the Merkist replied. Before leaving, the assassin stood for a moment at the foot of the chair, looking down at Oranu, shaking his head. Oranu looked up for a moment before closing his eyes and letting out an audible sigh. On the way out of Alpha Origi, the assassin spoke with Ditra again. Loyalty and efficiency were attributes the Merkist believed in rewarding just as quickly as incompetence or betrayal needed to be snuffed out. It was one of the reasons he was still around, while others like him had flamed out. He'd known of quite a few killers who'd risen fast because of their brutality and willingness to take any mark. Most of them had also disappeared overnight because someone like Ditra had taken enough abuse and saw an opportunity out of that abuse. Positive reinforcement wasn't a hallmark of their business, but he practiced it when warranted. Not only did the Merkist transfer a quarter of the original bounty on the Dreesen girl to Ditra, he also let the Rexes know his part in settling the matter quickly, more or less making Ditra nearly as untouchable on Alpha Origi as the Merkist himself. The Merkist hadn't even jumped out of the system before Ditra came through again. Janu Sawal, Outer Rim North, 115, Suite 4481, Annuncium, Alpha Merced, tag number, GB 8774-3412. Less than 12 hours, and Ditra had the guy's alias, his address, and his ship's tag number. Missouri, he knew, had to be an arrogant bastard to think he could put out a hit like that in the first place. But to do it and then stay? to stay out in the letters after that. The Merkist would have risked going after him on Iophos even. One way or another, Miziri had to die. Not just because he had to die, but because everyone else had to know he was dead. The Rexes couldn't have it any other way. He couldn't have it any other way. Government asset, private citizen, corporation, didn't matter. You drop a hit like that, trying to sneak it through under a fake name, unleashing hell all over the letters, and then to keep an address public enough that a single, clever, connected contact halfway across the letters could get your tag number in half a day. It was almost unbelievable, that level of arrogance and stupidity. Miziri was the type of guy he wished he could kill twice. Once, though, would have to do. He pinged Ditra back. Tell the Rexes to let him sit. I'll take care of him with my compliments. Let Miziri think he's slipped out of it. I want to see what he does. I want regular reports on the Dreesen girls' ship and crew, too. Anything you can get. Our contacts, and all the intel you can pull from the Rexes. There was plenty of other work to be done out in the letters. As much as Mearsong Rex and the Merkist wanted Miziri dealt with, neither one of them were where they were after so many years because they were impatient. Merkist had eyes all over the letters, including Annuncium. He wasn't waiting for Miziri to pop his head up. He could have his head whenever he wanted it. Tracking Miziri's movements in the final months of his life could tell them almost as much as his final moments would. Who he was meeting, where he was going, what he was up to. And patience afforded one in the Merkist's profession choices, especially with an arrogant bastard like Miziri. He got regular reports in between jobs, from the Rexes, from Ditra, from his guy on Annuncium, from other sources. Once, months after the initial incident on Alpha Origi, the Merkist got a report from his contact on Annuncium that Carolina Dreesen and her crew were out there. Miziri wasn't on Annuncium at the time, and the contact seemed to think it was a coincidence, that they had other business there. But it was curious that the two parties almost crossed paths, right on Miziri's doorstep. Coincidence or no, the Merkist wasn't willing to wait any longer. He told his guy on Annuncium to move and let him know when the trap was set. From then, it was another 4 weeks. He received a ping with a time and a vector, so he set an intercept course. Yet again, it boggled the mind. How a man like Miziri could just park his ship and leave the key sets to the drudges and bots there on the station, without a care in the world. Every time, it felt like a lesson that needed to get taught. Oh, the hard way. How he enjoyed the hard way. When Miziri's eyes finally popped open again, the Merkist could see that familiar range of emotions in them, from faint recognition of consciousness to confusion, to sudden wide-eyed awakening, to greater confusion and disbelief, to disorientation, to questioning of whether it was a hallucination, a dream. Then, finally, there was realization, the stubborn persistence of the moment. This wasn't going away, whatever it was. Merkist could only imagine. One moment, feeling a little lightheaded but fine. In Miziri's case, in between gulps of his half-eaten pouch of Iophan stew in his ship's small galley, somewhere on a cruising vector between Annuncium and the Alphas. Then, you wake up strapped to a chair in a dull red fog. Hot, confused, a mask over your mouth and nose, goggles fixed over your eyes. And then you realize, those skeletons across from you, strapped to those chairs, all of them, they all seem to be in a very similar posture to the one you're stuck in. How, oh how did I get here? The Merkist could see him wondering it. The eyes gave it away. He didn't even have to activate the neuroband. I know from experience, the Merkist said, helmet to earpiece, that you're asking yourself where the hell you are. We'll get to the how, the who am I, the why, all that. We'll get to all of it. I like to talk. All those former people out there in front of you, my little boneyard, they keep all my secrets. They're the only ones, This is the only place I can talk openly, you see. So I do. No, no, not yet. That's not how it works. You'll get your chance, Mr. Missouri. I'm talking now. I don't appreciate interruptions. See, for someone like me, it's rare to enjoy talking. Not a very smart move in my line of work. That's why they tell you to beware of the quiet types. Me, I love talking, though, so I have to be disciplined. Know when to keep my mouth shut. On these rare occasions I can speak, I relish it. So, shall we begin? Missouri began to tug against the restraints on the chair. The Mercus took a deep breath. I'm trying to be polite. These are your last moments as a human being, Mr. Missouri. I would think you would want them to be as pleasant as possible. As I said, I like to talk. So when you die, I'm not going to leave you with any mystery about it. I'm going to tell you everything I know about how you ended up in that chair. I find that part oddly fulfilling, actually. I think I might have enjoyed being a teacher. In some ways, I am. Unfortunately for you, you'll never get to apply any of the lessons I teach you today. But I will enjoy teaching you all the same. The hardest lesson, if experience has taught me anything, is that rats like you have a very hard time accepting that you are now powerless. You enjoyed having control over others, as I do. Life and death, the ultimate power. I enjoy that. I am not going to lie to you. But I told you I was going to get to specifics. Let's establish a little trust here, so that you know I'm going to follow through on what I tell you. First, the red, foggy atmosphere you see all around you is of a large moon that only has a letter and a number, which it shares with its star. You're on Gamma 315 2D, very remote. Orbiting that star, Gamma 315, a red dwarf, dim, nearly valueless, uninhabited, unvisited, present company excluded, of course. So the odds of anyone even finding your body in my lifetime is maybe a tiny fraction of a % greater than 0. But I'm not a mathematician. It's 0, let's say, because it is. That red atmosphere is toxic, obviously. You are going to breathe it, eventually, and it is going to kill you. The mask over your mouth and nose is filtering the atmosphere. And here's the fun part. I have a little control here in my eyepiece that allows me to titrate the mixture you inhale with each breath. Want to try? Missouri looked up at the Mercist's towering figure. In that dim light, both of them masked, he couldn't see his tormentor's face. He shook his head. Well, we have to establish a baseline. Your new neighbors all went through this, and look at them, smiling back at you now. They're fine. How about we start at 1.5? Just enough to let you know you're still breathing. Missouri stopped breathing. You could do that. Hold your breath, yes. But then, when you inevitably give in, you're going to take a huge breath, and it's going to sting. I've caught a puff every now and again coming back and forth so many times with all your new friends. At that mix, it's a bit like eating a spicy meal, only in your lungs. Not so fun, but not agony. Give it a try. The Mercist waited. Suit yourself. It took nearly a minute before Missouri couldn't hold his breath any longer. He coughed. There it is. Now we can begin. That wasn't so bad. That was 1.5. Just for perspective, when I take the mask off at the end of this conversation, at 100%, it'll take about 3 breaths to kill you. Or, depending on how the conversation goes, I may turn up the levels, or I may turn them down again, as I already have. Just 1 breath is usually enough, though, unless you're a masochist. This can be quick and painful, or very long and very painful. The choice is yours. A lot of people don't get a choice in their death, do they? So, to begin. Miziri looked up at him. The Merkist could see his eyes. Me? Oh, well. Does my identity really matter all that much? I kill people for a living. And as you can see, I'm quite good at my job. The Merkist gestured toward the skeletons arrayed before Miziri, nearly a dozen within eyesight. There were more, farther into the fog in front of Miziri, even more behind him, lots more. My guy on Annuncium, he told me you like to visit the girls there. That's a cruel business, you know, and I say that as an assassin. In a way, though, there's often some justice in my work. None in theirs, was there? That didn't even bother you, though, did it? Their lives. I reckon not. Anyway, I mention it because they always call that the oldest profession. Personally, and I think this may be a chicken or egg thing, but I suspect my kind at least have a claim. I'm biased, I know. But, I mean, there's a long tradition, right? You know what I'm talking about. We're sort of in the same field. Anyway, that's immaterial. Annuncium. Yeah. I told you I'd tell you how you got here. What this was all about. Oh, and your last mistake. The final lesson. Let's start there. You are dead because you were careless with who you let near your spaceship. Proximally, anyway. That's how I killed nearly... The Merkist paused and looked behind him, and then back at Miziri. Actually, everyone in this particular boneyard. Yeah, I think they all made the same mistake as you. And the thing that baffles me is how it's not widely known. Your ship disappears, and people think, well, that's funny. Space travel is dangerous, though. For certain people, I guess that's true. The distal reason, though, the real reason you're sitting in that chair, is that you placed a hit on the Chancellor of Athos's daughter Carolina, presumably on behalf of the Iofan government. We're going to discuss that a little bit. That's the part where you get to talk. But, suffice it to say, you shouldn't have done that. Certainly not without disclosing her identity to the people you were contracting. And certainly not in Mirsong Rex's flagship outpost without his explicit blessing to do so. That is why you're in that chair, Mr. Miziri. It's not that I care about Athos one way or another, or have any feeling at all about the Dreesen girl. Part of it is the principle of the thing. You don't ask a man like me to kill somebody without disclosing a piece of information like that. And you certainly don't conceal it, because the real reason you're killing the girl, again presumably, is that you want Athos out in the letters for some reason. You're going to tell me those reasons, because neither I nor Mirsong Rex agree with you, Mr. Miziri. We don't want Athos in the letters. This is our territory. It's not Athos's, and it certainly isn't Iophos's territory, Mr. Miziri. The real reason you're in that chair, learning your last lesson, might be the oldest lesson that men like me have been teaching men like you since men first became men. You tried to take what is ours from us. The Merkist knelt down to Miziri's eye level, a meter from his head, locking eyes with his victim, taking a measure of his spirit. Some are defiant, some are resigned, some are pitiful and cowardly. Few took Miziri's posture, cold and seemingly neutral. I think that's about all I have to say. It's your time to share now. This is the part where you get to make your choice. You can be forthright, and this can be over quickly. Or... The Merkist stood and looked over his shoulder, then turned and pointed. You see that one? Third from your left. That was a man named Connaft, I think. It's hard to remember them all, or which is which. It's beside the point. Anyway, let's say that's Connaft. He had a large sum of money that didn't belong to him, and he had a tremendously stubborn mind. He thought I wasn't a professional. He thought that I might kill him by mistake before I got it out of him, and that his woman and kid might get to keep the money. Do you know how I know that? The Merkist paused, calling up the display on his face shield. That's right, because I have a neuroband on you. A lot of your new neighbors weren't familiar with the process, but I'm guessing that you are. Iophos even trained you to resist, I'll bet. Do you want to test your training, Mr. Maziri? I've got training too. The Merkist gestured to the seated skeletons in that foggy red haze. See? I'm well trained, Mr. Maziri. And I don't often get to say it, but I love my job. I love my job. Is there anything else in the universe you'd rather be doing than this? Deep Space Assassin. This has been an original story, written and read by P.E. Rowe. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this story. If you're enjoying the channel and you enjoyed today's story, I'd humbly ask that you leave a like on today's video, as it helps the channel to grow and reach more sci-fi fans like you. If you're new to the channel, or maybe today's story was your first exposure, the plotline in today's story crossed with the channel's ongoing space adventure serial, The Misfits. We've got another episode of The Misfits scheduled for next Thursday, so if you like stories like this one, the Misfits series is for you. If you'd like to catch up completely and help support the channel ad-free, you'll find a link to my bookstore in the description below, where you can find The Misfits Book 1 in paperback, ebook, or audiobook. There's also a link in the description for the video of the complete first season on YouTube, which does have ads on it. Either way, you can help support the channel and get caught up on all the Misfits adventures fast. Be sure to subscribe and click the notifications bell to ensure you're notified when each new episode goes live. Today's story, Deep Space Assassin, was the channel's topic poll winner from February. This topic was suggested by a regular listener, so if you have a topic you'd like to see turned into a story, leave it in a comment and we'll see if we can get it into the next topic poll. I'm a huge fan of the stories that come out of these polls, so I really appreciate your suggestions and votes, as they help to take the channel in interesting new directions. Next Thursday, we'll be back with the third episode of The Misfits this year, on the 28th of March, and a new Heartsock story for the 4th of April, ostensibly on lunar mining, episode 20 of The Misfits on April 11th, again very much penciled in. Stay tuned for updates as things may change, especially with this week's topic poll winner very much poised to keep me on my toes in the coming weeks. Until next week, this has been P.E. Rowe. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.